Okay, I should be live. And here I am finally back again. We've been quite a bit of rescheduling at work the past couple of weeks because of guys taking vacation. And one guy got married, so he took a few days off. So hopefully I'll be back to having Tuesdays off again. I'm off next Tuesday for sure, so we'll have a live show next week. After that, it's kind of hard to say exactly how the schedule is going to work out yet because they haven't posted it yet. But hopefully I will be able to get Tuesdays off in the foreseeable future. But anyway, I'm starting to wonder just what in the hell do I have to do to give this thing away? Our last winner never got back to me, and that's been 3 weeks ago now. Our first winner, Cora Scotch, she didn't get back to me. Bernadette didn't get back to me. So I'm going to wait about 10-15 minutes or so into the show and see if they show up in the comments. And if they don't, whoever's in here then, I'm going to have a drawing and go ahead and give this away yet again. Now, after the drawing, you'll have 10 minutes to get a shipping address to me. If you don't get it back to me in 10 minutes, we'll draw again. So, hopefully somebody will finally get this beautiful large logo number 8 Griswold Dutch oven. Yeah, crazy for not claiming that. Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see, where you just stop in and watch a video for a bit, leave a comment, and you luck out and end up winning it. But the problem is YouTube, unless you have more than 1,000 subscribers, you can't get community comments, so I can't, leave a comment directly on their channel. And, it gets hard to track people down if they don't have much of a YouTube channel, or if they're just, like I said, kind of a passerby. But hopefully somebody will end up with this thing before the end of the night. And I need a drink. Hopefully somebody end up with this thing by the end of the night. And YouTube was really kind of stupid about it. When Google first bought out YouTube, they decided they wanted to make YouTube into Facebook. So they did away with community posts, with private messages. You used to have a little message board right on your channel page. You could leave messages right on people's channels. It was easy to talk back and forth. And there were communities growing up and thriving on YouTube. And they said, no, we're going to eliminate all that, force everybody to use Google+, which was already dying. It was a failure at the time. So they tried to graft Google+ onto YouTube. And of course, it inevitably died because it was already dead to begin with. And they ended up destroying all the stuff that, they already had going on. Well, then they decided, well, we're not going to be Facebook anymore. Now, of course, Facebook is getting to where you can post videos and live videos and all the things you used to be able to do on YouTube, which, showed their sense in that. Then YouTube decided, well, we're going to be, we're going to be something else entirely now. And they never quite figure out what they're going to do with YouTube for Google. So, you can't make private messages anymore, things like that. And, it makes it harder to get hold of people that have actually won something if you have a drawing. But anyhow, like I said, Cora Scotch, Bernadette, if you guys show up here in the next 10 minutes, it's 6:35. So at 6:45, I'm going to have a drawing for this for, whoever's here now and has left a comment. If you're here and you want a chance to win this, leave a comment and that'll enter you. That's all you got to do. When I draw a name, you have 10 minutes to send an email to the Mudbrooker at yahoo.com with a shipping address, and I'll get this thing sent out finally. And if nobody claims it in 10 minutes after the drawing, we'll do another one. Anyway, it's going to be kind of fun next week at work. We're going to fire up the coal boiler, right? They have 2 boilers in this plant. One is natural gas fired. It's a bit newer. The other one is a coal-fired behemoth that we got to get that fired up because they have to take the other boiler offline for maintenance. And it ought to be fun. I mean, it kind of works. It's an old machine. It was brand new in 1957. So, it's super modern technology involved. And, the mechanical part of it is a bit questionable. It's got a lot of wear and tear and a lot of use on it. So it ought to be fun to get that thing cranked up and running. Once we get it lit, you got to climb inside there, build a fire, and actually light the fire, and get out of there before it gets too hot. And get that going. Got to run it for about a week and a half, get everything heated through, make sure nothing's going to leak or explode, and run it for a little while longer, and then do all the emissions testing on it and all of that sort of stuff. So it's going to take, about 2 or 3 weeks to actually get this thing running and online and operational, and then run it for another couple of weeks while they work on the other boiler, and then switch back over. So it should be a lot of fun. Oh yeah, I did the jelly video. It's on my channel, and I forgot to grab a link for it. I was going to put it in the description. I forgot to set up the StreamYard's stream until about 15 minutes before the actual show. Normally I set that up the day before and, put out the link and the announcement and all that for it. But I completely spaced it. And, but I did put out a thing on my community page, saying that, yes, there'll be a show this week. But I didn't actually bother to set up the StreamYards. But I finally got that all done and got her in here. And here we are. Talk about spray-on nonstick oil and cast iron. Screwed up 2 pans that were bulletproof, cooked on both pans. I think it's a propellant. Yeah, and some of the spray-on, like Pam and things like that, they have an emulsifier in them, to emulsify the oil. And that doesn't really work all that good on cast iron. Lodge makes a pump spray, seasoning spray, but all that is actually just canola oil. So you can just wipe on canola oil, or if you have grapeseed oil, canola oil, whatever kind of oil you're using, you can put it in a spray bottle and spray it on. But the canned aerosol stuff, yeah, a lot of that has emulsifiers in it. So yeah, it does kind of work, but you're better off with just plain oil rather than the aerosol stuff. Anyway, I did get a few new things over the last couple of weeks. I got this thing. It ain't cast iron, but it is pretty cool. That's a Swan's Down cake flour, makes better cakes. That's a Swan's Down cake pan. Swan's Down cake flour the brand is still around. I'll move in a little closer there. That's a Swan's Down cake pan, patent applied for, and that's the Katzinger Company, Chicago, licensed manufacturers. What makes this cool, it's not really meant to be a bundt cake pan. Bundt is actually a brand name. Technically, it's a tubed cake pan. But the little hole in the middle is so that it cooks evenly all the way through. And it has these little sliding side doors on the side, which you can see open up into the inside. Open the other one, maybe you can see all the way through it. What that does, when you flip it over and try and dump your cake out, it lets air in so that it doesn't vacuum lock to the bottom of the pan. And if worse comes to worse, you can take a butter knife blade and get inside of there and scrape the bottom of your pan loose. And I thought that was just slicker than hell, and paid $8 for it. And I'll definitely be using that at some point soon. It needs a little bit of cleaning up. Somebody's used it fairly recently. It's got a little bit of dried on cake batter or something of that sort. But yeah, I thought that was just cool as hell. It's got those, like I said, the little vent doors in the side, so you can get in there and let the air in there. Anyway, let's see. I'll set that down. I got one of these. I don't have one of these. Now, you might even recognize that just by the handle. This is a Wagner's 1891 skillet. You know, it's a number 8 10-inch skillet. And I just got that today, in fact. I paid $9.95 for that. And that's about what they're worth. You know, they're 10, 15, 20 bucks, depending on the size for these type of skillets. The Wagner 1891 were a 100th anniversary edition that Wagner came out with in 1991. And they kept making them up until the early 2000s, I think. And on the back, this one's got a good bit of buildup on it, so you can't really see. But it says Wagner's 1891 original, and it has the seasoning instructions right on the back. You know, put it in the oven, heat it up, oil it up, and all that. Now, some people think these actually were made in 1891, and you see them now and then on auction sites or in flea markets and things like that, selling for insane prices because they figure, oh, it's, you know, an 1891 skillet, that's got to be worth at least $100. Well, it's not. You know, these are $10, $20 skillets. The quality kind of varies on them. This one's pretty good. I've seen some that were fairly rough though, but you know, a lot of them are pretty good. If you want something like this, you know, shop around and find one that's got a little better surfaces on it. Ain't quite so rough and grainy. You know, but they're not bad skillets in general. And like I said, they're pretty cheap. And I wanted to have one, you know, just for when I, you know, discussing Wagnerware, so I can actually show somebody what these things look like. And they made a lot of stuff with the 1891 series. They made skillets, they made teapots, Dutch ovens. They made griddles. You know, made pretty much a complete line of cast iron stuff for this 1891 series. So they are pretty neat. Anyhow, I also got this one. That is a small logo Griswold with the grooved handle. Now, the grooved handle is the style handle they used at the end of Griswold's existence. They started them about 1952 or so, and they ran up until the Griswold factory closed in 1957. So, you know, that's the end of the line for Griswold, and they got that big groove down the back side of the handle, so they're pretty easy to identify. Paid $20 for that. I know I have a number 3, and I think I have a number 7 of these, but $20 for that was, you know, too good of a deal to pass up. And that'll clean up nice once I get her all done. That was definitely worth the $20. What your grandma's chicken fryer handle looked like, but it wasn't marked. Yeah, the that style of handle, you know, Griswold kind of did use that in the 50s and 60s. You see that, you know, kind of thumb rest like that on the Wagner square skillets and the chef skillets. You'll see them on that. Usually, though, they have a squared off end to the handle instead of being rounded like that. But that is kind of a Wagner thing that Wagner did. So, I mean, it could be a unmarked Wagner from the, you know, 50s or 60s. Anyway, one was a small slant logo. Well, there wasn't really a small slant logo. It was big. The slant logo itself is a pretty early one. That was from about 1910, 1912 up until about 1920 with the slant logo. Then they switched over to the large block logo with the block letters. Your fridge went out and you've been trying to can all the meat in your freezer. Yeah, that's going to make for a long day. Hopefully you can get her all salvaged. Let me back up a little bit here and say hi to everybody. It's almost time for the drawing. Got Gregory Green, Mike Newby, Shanudo, Cast Iron Restore, Donna Harder, Elvin Shane, Billy Lee, howdy, Debbie D, Darla Allred, Sandra Schmidt, she's a corpse, Let's see, Generational Homestead, howdy. Kimberly Miller, Aurora Meteora, hello. I think I said hi to Louise Williams already. Let's see, warm, blessed summer solstice. Yeah, longest day of the summer, and that's good because I got things to do after I get done with this yet. 6 Drops, good to see ya. Stalking me everywhere I go. You got Naked HD. It's always good to have Naked HD around. Molly Smith, Morgan Freedom, Christina Ayula, Barbara Cassell. Cooking your hubby's Nana's fig jam. Fig jam sounds good. We don't really have figs around here. I mean, you can get them now and then. You know, some of the farmers markets get them in when they're in season in California, but you know, mostly a California kind of fruit around here. But anyway, all right. Let me bring up my comment picker going here, and we'll try again once more to give away this here Dutch oven. Let's see, gotta share my screen. Wait a minute here, gotta take this, bring it down here onto my other screen. Okay. Share screen. Okay, there we are. Now, are you ready? We're going to draw once more for the Griswold number 8 large block logo Dutch oven without a lid. You're on your own for the lid. So, let me get down here. There's a broadcast. It's too small to almost see down here. There we go. Start collecting comments. Okay, 27 entries. And here we go with the drawing. Barbara Passell. All right. Barbara, you have 10, count them, 10 minutes to get a message to the Mudbrooker at yahoo.com. Send an email with a shipping address, and I will send you this fabulous Dutch oven. All right. Hopefully, we finally actually have somebody who will win. For a minute, you thought the troll was going to win. Yeah, that would have been kind of fun. I could have started spamming them. Let's see, stop screen. There we go. Okay, Barbara's on it. So hopefully, finally, I can get this out of my house. Start making room because I need more room because I'm constantly getting more stuff. Anyway, apart from the drawing that, was going to have a little bit of a look at that, some of the come on, you. Try to get this back up into here. There we go. Close that. Going to have a look at some of the auction prices. I saved up the ones for really old stuff, some of the really old vintage, you know, pre-1920 kind of stuff that's on that Goodwill site. So I got a bunch of that all stocked up here and almost ready to go. Let me try and get that set up. Myself logged in. Not terribly well prepared for this. Let me have a couple of weeks off. I got to retrain myself from scratch again. But let's see, favorites. I have them mostly sorted. There's probably a few things on there that I don't really need. That I was just kind of looking at, but get these up here and bring them down there. I should really get myself a little bigger second monitor. It's kind of handy because it's out of the way and it's not real big down there, but it's an old little flat screen. It's not terribly good resolution, and it needs to be a little bit bigger for my purposes. Let's see, sharing screen again. Select. There we go. Okay. And there's a few things on here that I got to put my glasses on to see that. Hopefully you can see that fairly well on your end. Let me know if it's too bad. I always confuse myself having two screens because I got a cursor on one screen. Email address again, themudbrooker, all one word, at yahoo.com. Okay, there we are. Show you a few of these things. All right, this one here was kind of interesting. This might be an unmarked favorite wear. I'm not exactly positive. Get that full screen. Not exactly positive, but since it sold for 25 bucks, it's definitely worthwhile. It's an older skillet. You can tell by the style of the handle and the heat ring on it. But that looks like a favorite style of a heat ring. So that could be an unmarked one. At any rate, 25 bucks for that was a pretty good price. It's definitely worth taking a chance on. Picked up your first gate marked piece with a name, a 5-quart pot marked S&P Company of Philadelphia. Yeah, S&P, there's some variations on it. There's SP, S&P, but yeah, they were a known company, so you could probably find a little bit of history on it with a little bit of searching on it. How do you enter? Well, we already gave it away, but when I do giveaways on the stream, all you have to do is leave a comment, and I use a comment picker that'll pick your comment. So just by asking how I enter would have entered you. Anyway, yeah, 25 bucks for that is a pretty good price because, 25 bucks is a good price for any cast iron pan of that size. Let's see here what we got. This is a little ugly hammered skillet. That only sold for 11 bucks, which is kind of surprising because, there's a bit of demand for the ugly hammered ones. And then, it doesn't really show all that great in the picture, the hammered marks, but you can see it looks kind of roughly lumpy there. And, that's why they call it ugly hammered. It's not a real well-defined pattern. It's just kind of vague dimples. But they're pretty good pans. They work nice. And there's nothing wrong with this one. So, yeah, there's no real reason why I shouldn't have sold for more than that. But 11 bucks is a hell of a good deal on them. Are these pans I purchased? No, I just, kind of put them in the favorites there to keep track of them and see what's what. Keep track of prices. Sometimes I do buy them. If I'll bid on something. Let me get this guy blocked again. An error occurred. Wow. Somebody else will have to blockify that. But anyway, yeah, sometimes I bid on them, and sometimes I don't. Always wondered what's on the sides of your mom's skillets. She never cleans them, and boy, are they crusty. Yeah, I mean, you can never tell sometimes. You can get kind of a rough idea, of how old they are. Usually you can tell a pan from, we'll be looking at a lot of vintage stuff tonight, real antique stuff from 1920 or before. And you can usually tell by the style, you know, whether it's before 1920 or from like 1920 to 1960. You can get a decent idea anyhow. But what else we got here? This is an old Eerie skillet. Eerie was the brand name that Griswold used, you know, from the beginning of their company. But they used Eerie on all of their skillets up until about 1908, 1909. They started transitioning to where they started putting the Griswold name on all their skillets instead of just Eerie. And there's a closer one. This is called a hook R Eerie. You know, this is a known variation. Instead of just having a straight line coming off the R, it's got a little hook on the end. And, you know, that's one of the variations that people look for. So, and that one sold, what that sell for? $182.99. Yeah, that's a little bit high-ish maybe, but it's not far out of line. You know, for most of your vintage Eerie pans, you're looking at least 150 for a number 8, you know, 150 to 250 in there somewhere. You know, for one that isn't restored and cleaned up, you know, 180 is a bit high. But like I said, it's not really far out of line. You know, some of the really antique stuff is getting up there pretty good in price, you know, where you're looking at things that are anywhere from 125 on up to 300. What's the difference between antique vintage? Not really much of a difference. You know, usually something, like you say, more than 100 years old to be considered antique, where less than that is just vintage. But it's just kind of a, you know, the terms aren't exactly, you know, cast in stone. So this one was kind of cool. Cast iron eagle bread mold, except these are ducks. Kind of a neat little thing. Yeah, I considered getting it, but the shipping was kind of high. But yeah, they're eagles somehow turned into ducks. But that sold for $15, and you know that wasn't a bad price for that. But I think that was, yeah, the inland Northwest. So the shipping on that, for me at least, would have been more than what you would have bid for it at $15. Just bid on that Wagner ware. Oh, cool. Take another sip here and move on down the line. I've got a bunch, you know, 4 or 5 different waffle irons. This one here sold for $127. You know, I'll just kind of, actually I'll show this one. This one is in the nicest shape, and it was the cleanest. You know, that's an American number 8 Griswold. That's a 1908 patent date on that. And that's, you know, pretty typical of the ones that you find. It's got the twisted wire handles on it. And that sold for $127, which is pretty good with the base, because, you know, usually with the base, you're looking a little closer to 150. So that's a fairly good deal on that one. You know, you got that one pretty reasonable price. But you see, I'll flip through the rest of the pictures here. You know, see what they're all about. You got your base and your 2 paddles. And yeah, that's a 1908 patent. That's the 883. There's a different number on the other side, 885, I think it is. And the bases, there's a couple of different numbers for the base that'll work. But the that little tab that keeps it from flipping all the way over is in the 3 o'clock position. There's another one, it's number 357, I think. And that has the tab down about 4 o'clock. You know, so the bases aren't really interchangeable because there's a notch in the base for that tab. They'll fit in there, but they won't really flip right, and they won't sit right. You saw the Sportsman in my screenshot. Yeah, those Sportsman drills are handy. I mean, eventually I'll probably end up with one, I'm sure, if I find one cheap. But you know, it's not a huge priority, but if I come across one for a good price, I'll definitely get one. I picked up a BSR flat girdle for $5. Almost saw when the handle's even slightly warped. Going to use it. Yeah, that's a big problem with you know, the big rectangular griddles. They tend to twist and warp a bit. You know, if you find one that's really dead flat, that's hard to find. But a little bit of warp usually doesn't hurt them too much. I mean, I got one that I got for like $5, and it's really bowed up bad. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. This one here went for quite a bit of money, $232. This is a chrome-plated Griswold number 6 skillet with a lid. Now, you know, number 6 is a little bit more of an uncommon size, but number 6 lids are really tough to find, especially the skillet lids that have the ears that cover the skillet. And this one you can see nice. That's what Griswold called duochrome. They would really polish the outside of the skillet and part of the lid, and the rest of it they would leave unpolished, and then they'd chrome plate it, and you get that two-tone chrome effect. This one's in fairly decent shape. There's a little bit of, you can see it's, you know, a little bit worn, a little bit rusty on the inside. But yeah, it's with that lid that really bumps the price up quite a bit, because it's real hard to find a number 6 lid of any kind, much less, you know, matching chrome skillet and lid. And this Dutch oven is actually a Smiley logo favorite-ware, and it's got the lid for it. And I thought they showed a better picture of that. That's actually a Scotch bowl. It's got the ring on it, and you know, it's more of a bowl shape than the Dutch oven, but it's got a lid for it, and that's the right lid that goes with that sort of thing. So anyhow, that's nice favorite-ware. And between the two of them, you know, $232 is a pretty good price, because alone, you know, that Dutch oven with the or Scotch bowl, I think it's a Dutch oven, but it's kind of halfway in between the two. You know, favorite-ware alone, that would go for $150, $175, and the same with that skillet and lid. You know, match pair like that. You know, you could easily pay $200 for something like that. So, you know, $232 for the pair of them is pretty good. Would you clean the chrome as you would aluminum? Still waiting for the video. Hint, hint. Yeah, I'm working on it. I've been, you know, having to bounce back and forth between, I work 12-hour shifts, but I've been bouncing back and forth between days and nights, covering other guys' shifts, and that pretty much kills a day on you trying to readjust to go back to night. But to clean chrome or nickel plating, you can use oven cleaner on it, and it'll take the stuff off, and then just wipe it. Don't scrub it hard with something abrasive. You know, don't use steel wool on your really polished chrome like that. Well, you can to some point, but you know, you're gonna scuff it. And other than that, you know, you can just use you know, oven cleaner or lye on it, and it won't hurt chrome or nickel. Let me see here. But like I said, just be a little more gentle with your scrubbing on it. Iron Age. Somebody was watching bid on that Iron Age skillet. I'm not sure who. Can't remember who it was, but they were bidding on this, and I was kind of curious if they actually got it. But Iron Age, I forgot all about it again. I know who made it. It's somebody will probably remind me, but it keeps slipping out of my mind. The company that made Iron Age, and they made another brand name back in the 30s mostly is when they made them. But that sold for $76, and I was just kind of curious if whoever it was that was going to bid on it actually got that. because I can't remember much of anything right now. Can't remember who was saying they were bidding on it. And yeah, this is a this is a Lodge fish fryer, they call these. It's a great big roasting pan. They're about 2 foot long and about a foot wide. And they're made to sit on top of either a Sportsman grill, or you can use them for a roasting pan in your oven. You use them on the stovetop for deep frying fish. But this one's got, a nice duck scene on the lid. A little better shot of it there. And even the plain ones of these go for pretty good money. A little rusty inside, but that ain't no big deal. The outside looks pretty good. And what does it sell for? $250. And yeah, that's about what they go for. Like I said, especially for the ones that have I think there's a couple of different wildlife scenes. There's like a deer and a fish and a duck. And, they're really popular. So people bid them up pretty high when they come around. Usually you're looking $200 to $300 for something like that. Let's see, which is that? Cast iron skillet. I forgot what was special about that. I don't know. This was kind of interesting. This sold for $136, a little bit more than that last Griswold, and it's a Griswold on one side, and it's mismatched paddles. They were both made by Griswold, but one side, there we go. Not sure how well you can see that. That's a Puritan, which was a brand made by Griswold for Sears. And let me get my cursor back up here to block the bot again. Error occurred. I'm not sure if it's actually blocking it or not, because I get an error on the StreamYard. And anyhow, this was made by Griswold, but it's not a Griswold marked paddle, where the other side is definitely a Griswold paddle. So it's a mismatched pair, and it's still sold for $36, which isn't too overly bad for a mismatched deal like that. Let me get back over here. Keep losing my cursor when I gotta move back and forth between screens. Let's see. This is just a pair of just the paddles for $46. For the shape they're in, that's a pretty decent price. You can usually get waffle irons without the base in pretty good shape for around $75 or so. So $50 for a pair that needs work. It's a pretty fair price. And these are, I think these are the number 337s, because you see that little tab is down at about 4 or 5 o'clock on there instead of being straight out the side. Are the heat stands marked in any way? What do you mean? Oh, the Lodge, the grill itself, the Sportsman's grills. They have Lodge brand name cast in and all that. They're pretty much all cast iron. And there's a couple of different companies that made them. Columbus Stove Works made a Sportsman's grill type of thing. Lodge makes their version. There's a couple of different companies out there. Let's see. This one. Here we go. This sold for $3,001. This is a number 14 Griswold skillet, but it has a lid with it. Let me see here. It's a number 14 Griswold large logo skillet, and you can see it has the catalog number in there. So that was one that was made by Griswold. We showed one earlier that was a number 14, the same sort of thing, but it didn't have that. And didn't have the catalog number. And that was actually one that was made after they merged with Wagner. They used the Griswold patterns, but it wasn't actually made by Griswold. It was made by Wagner. Oh, the waffle irons. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. With the Griswold, sometimes they'll actually have lettering, Griswold Manufacturing Company. Sometimes they'll just have a number 8 underneath where the hinge of the two, the knob for the hinge sits. There'll just be a number 8 on that. And sometimes they're not marked at all other than a catalog number. So it kind of varies. And a lot of the Wagnerware ones weren't marked either. So, it kind of varies quite a bit. $3,000. Yeah, that's high-ish. Normally a number 14 skillet like that alone sells for around $1,000, but it has the lid with it, and a number 14 lid is almost unheard of. You never see a number 14 lid. I mean, you'll find 100 of the skillets that size before you'll find a single lid. So the lid by itself, you could probably easily get $1,500 to $2,000. Put them both together as a pair. Yeah, $3,000 isn't really terribly surprising. Like I said, the skillet alone goes for about $1,000, but having a lid with it as a set really jacks the price up. That lid reminds you of a Basque bread recipe from Old Sunset. Wonder how they found such a cool pan that made the round rings in the bread. Ah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, $3,000 for that. It's not surprising. I mean, it's more than I would pay, and a lot more than I could afford to pay. But yeah, a lid like that is extremely rare. I mean, you hardly ever find a lid that big ever. So back to closed items. It'd be nice if this would take you back to the closed items instead of making you go back through. And speaking of bread, this thing here, that's a Challenger breadware cast iron bread pan. It's like an oven within your oven. It basically is the way these things work. And I think there's another one for sale listed right now. This one sold for $200. That's about what you pay for them new. I mean, they sell for about $200. So you're not really saving anything on this, but you ain't overpaying either because they're about $200. It has a shallow kind of pan on the bottom. You'd put your loaf of bread on that, and then you'd cover it with that big high domed cover, and you get kind of a oven within an oven effect. You get the radiant heat from the cast iron, and it really bakes up your bread nice. It gets it to where it's like making bread in my wood cook stove oven because you get so much radiant heat from it. It really crispifies the crust. It's really neat. But like I said, these sell for about $200 new, so that wasn't too good of a deal on that. Were there cast iron stoves that could accommodate those huge skillets? Oh yeah, I mean, that stove of mine, you could easily cook on that with a number 14, and I have. I've got a number 14 BSR that I can't remember if I did that on a live stream or if I did a video where I was breaking that in and making fried potatoes on my cook stove with that. And that's really mostly what they're best for. If you're going to use it on a stovetop, you pretty much need something like that because otherwise you end up trying to span it between 2 or 3 different burners on a stove, and it doesn't work that good. Either that or they do work great in the oven, those really big skillets like that, or out over an open campfire. But if you're going to use it in the house on a stovetop, really the only thing you can cook on is a wood cook stove, or if you have a flat top, a flat steel top gas stove like they have in a commercial kitchen. Oh, that's the same Griswold lid you found in Taylorsville, North Carolina for $2. Mine fits a 10-inch. Oh, let me get back to it here. I think I have it was a Dutch oven that had the button logo. Yeah, this one right here. Here's another Griswold waffle iron. That one went for 142. So 125 to 150 with a base. This one has the base with a bail on it instead of having the handle type base, and they're all low bases. But yeah, it's generally what you pay for Griswold waffle irons nowadays is 125 to 150. Some of the older Wagnerware ones you can get a bit cheaper. Not a huge amount, but 20, 30, 40 bucks cheaper. But yeah, anything with a base, you're going to pay a bit more for. And yeah, here's that's a Dutch oven with the button logo on it. Let's see if they show me anything more here. This one had a trivet with it too. I forget what this one sold for. I have to look and see quick. But that's a number 8, large logo, and that sold for 152. That's about the going rate, especially with the trivet in it. Even without the trivet, Griswold with a lid and the button logo lid like that would easily sell for about 150. So yeah, it's pretty fair, pretty good deal on that coming with the trivet. And I think that trivet is marked too. I can't really see on my small screen. Do I have any experience with Asian tabletop grills, sort of hibachi style but shaped like a barrel? Not really. I haven't really played with any of those, so I have a 12-inch cast iron skillet that's mostly useless on the outer 2 inches, thanks to your electric coil range. Yeah, that's a lot of people really look for the big pans, but really much more than a number 8 on most stoves is about as big as you can get because of the burners. Even with gas burners, a gas burner will heat a little bit better, farther out from the flame because the heat will carry around it. But electric ones, yeah, you're not going to they're not going to get nearly as hot out on the edges as they should and as they do in the middle. Let's see. Yeah, like I said, I don't really know much about the tabletop grills. I have used hibachi grills in the past, but little barrel shaped ones I've never really come across. Let's see, this one here, that's a large logo number 4 Griswold skillet for 158 bucks. That seems a bit high, but number 4s are tough to find. 100 to 125 would seem a bit more reasonable. But, somebody wanted it bad enough that they paid 158 for it. Let's see. This I was kind of surprised that it went this cheap. 90 bucks. This is a Scotch bowl. Definitely. That Dutch oven kind of looked like a Scotch bowl, but this is definitely a Scotch bowl. They call it a Griswold wok, but actually it isn't. And is this the one that was Griswold manufacturing? No, this is a Griswold's Eerie. So this was from like 1908, 1910 in there somewhere when they're starting to put the Griswold name on things. They started with Griswold's Erie, and then there was the slant logo Griswold that said Erie underneath it. They kind of used both names for a while as they transitioned between them. Did Wagner and Griswold make their heat handles wired wrapped heat shields on the hunt for either brand? Yeah, I mean most of these waffle irons I've been showing, they all have the spiral wire handles. And if you're talking about skillets, I don't think they made wire handle skillets, but they both did make wooden handled cast iron skillets, mostly in the 19 teens, 1920s. And a lot of the aluminum skillets also have wooden handles on them. Yastanabe pots, but they're tabletop, huge charcoal briquettes, have a sauce well and 4 pedals for grilling. That sounds pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know much about them. Let me see if that get a little better. Yeah, I can get in closer here. Griswold's Erie. That's a number 732, number 4. But yeah, that sold for 89 bucks. And something like that I expect to pay a bit more for, up around 125. So, because, about 90 bucks seems to be kind of the generic price for Scotch bowls like that, whether they're, favorite Griswold Wagner. They all seem to sell in the 75 to 90 dollar range, unless it's something unusual like that. And yeah, it's kind of interesting that it went for that price. I'd expect to go for a bit more anyway. Scroll through. Yeah, I think we looked at this one already. $46. This was just kind of okay. Where were we? Oh, and this is a set of 3 small skillets for $252. As soon as that comes up, but they're actually an interesting little set. They're all number 4s, which I said, mentioned number 4s are kind of tough to find. Usually like a number 3 for most things, you'll pay 30, 40 bucks for, Griswold Wagner, something like that, because they're small. A number 4, it's not unusual to pay anywhere from 60 to 90 for a number 4, sometimes even more, depending on, exactly what it has. But these guys make a nice little set all on their own. They're not quite in the right order. You have a slant logo. Well, actually, go ahead. You got a slant logo, number 4, the Erie, Pennsylvania, USA. This was one of the early, Griswold logos. Not the earliest, but this one started at, started around 1912, in the 19 teens. And something like this will go for pretty good money. This is easily $100 by itself, or more even. Because slant logo, there's a lot of demand for anything with a slant logo, and a number 4 especially is going to run the price up. This is a small logo with a groove handle, and this is at the end of Griswold production at the Griswold plant. They shut it down in 1957 after they had merged with the company that owned Wagnerware. And this one, whoops, the first one actually, this one is a Wagwold. This is one that was Griswold branded, but it was made by Wagnerware. Probably made from a Wagnerware pattern. You can see the lettering is different on the logo. And anytime you see a Griswold that says "Made in USA" like that, not Erie, Pennsylvania, USA, but "Made in USA," and it has the size on it, 7-inch skillet. That's something that was made at the Wagner plant later. Like I said, you can really tell by the logo. I mean, the lettering is a lot different. That looks more like the Wagner typewriter style of font. But the 3 of them together for $252 isn't hugely out of line. Like I said, this one here especially, anywhere from $100 to $150 easily you could expect to pay for a number 4 slant logo. Yeah, they don't seem to be all quite the same size. Well, they're not exactly. They do look, like the, especially the ears are a bit bigger. They're a little bit closer in size, but one of them, this one here, definitely looks a lot smaller. And I think that's the grooved handled one. But they're all number 4s. And the size numbers never really were, terribly a fixed thing. There was no standard. So you'll see a lot of different sizes for something that has the same size number. But yeah, it's kind of a cool cool little series all on their own. Let's see. This was $61. This was a, was that just a skillet or was that a chicken fryer? That's a Pequaware, favorite skillet, number 8, but that's a Lodge lid for it. And it sold for $61, and that's a pretty good price, really, because usually a number 8 Smiley favorite ware, those will usually sell for 75, 80, 90 bucks. And a, Lodge lid, 20, 30. So you could easily expect to spend 100 to 125 on it, and they got it for 61. So that was a pretty good deal on that. Keep getting click closed items. Another thing that's kind of a pain about this site is you can't reorganize, you can't put the things in a different order. You're just kind of stuck with whatever order they throw them at you. Okay, this isn't a really old thing, but this is a Renfrow Dutch oven. Renfrow was a company in Los Angeles. I got one of these, and pretty much the only thing that they made was Dutch ovens as far as cast iron cookware goes. They made other castings. I mean, they were a foundry, but they made these Dutch ovens. They're kind of rough on the outside, but all the ones I've seen are really nice and smooth inside. They really got a beautiful finish on the inside of them. And the lids are real distinctive. They have this kind of asterisk star shape to the little drip tips on it. So if you ever see a lid that has that pattern on the bottom and 3 rings, 4 rings on top, it's a Renfrow lid. And there kind of shows the name Renfrow LA, made in Los Angeles. And they were in business from the early 1940s up until the mid 80s. So, they're out of business now. They're in business for a fairly decent amount of time. Normally these sell for around $50 or so, and so $40, 46 is about what you would expect to spend. I might have another one that I marked too. And you see them every now and then. They'll come up. There'll be 2 or 3 of them over a period of 2 weeks on the Goodwill site, and then you won't see one for 4 months, and then there'll be a whole bunch of them. What's the flat skillet? Flat skillet. I'm not sure which one you mean. Let's see, which one was this? This was a chicken fryer, number 8 Griswold large logo chicken fryer, and it's chrome plated. That was 101. That wasn't too bad of a price. Stover, a Stover waffle iron. That was a brand, I'm pretty sure Griswold made those too. And, or no, they might have been on their own, I forget. But that has a base, $80. It's pretty decent price. You can see it's got wooden handles. And, let's see. This, somebody got a hell of a good deal on this. It's pretty rough looking. But even without being able to see what it is exactly, this hinge is distinctive. That's called an acorn hinge. Or no, not an acorn hinge. That's a anyway, I forget what kind of hinge it is, but this is a very early Griswold manufacturing company. You can just kind of see it says, the Griswold manufacturing, I think is what that says. But this was 1880s into the early 1890s. Those handles look like they're probably replaced. They're a good bit shorter than what they should be. And the inside looks pretty good. But yeah, that style of hinge is Griswold had a patent on that, and they used that. I want to say it's not an acorn hinge. It's going to drive me nuts. I can't think of that one. but somebody got this for $57, and that is a pretty good deal. You'll probably never find the right base for it, but if you did, you'd probably have a $300 set easily for the two of them, for the waffle irons and the base. So yeah, that was quite the deal on that. Got to run, hubby mowing. You got big plans for the clippings. All right. Well, have fun with your grass clippings, and we'll see you later. It's going to drive me nuts trying to think of the name of that damn hinge now. Completely spaced out. This was something kind of interesting. I bid on this, but somebody outbid me. I wasn't going to pay quite that much. It's a cast iron skillet, but this is a sheet metal handle. I'm not quite sure if that's original to it or if that was something that somebody added on later. But I thought it was pretty neat anyway. It's gate marked. It's got one pour spout, got a heat ring, and it's got kind of a faint little gate mark on it. I think that shows a little better. But you see, that's just rolled sheet metal. And I think this is actually the original handle to it. I'm not sure who made that, but it's pretty neat. And that's an old, definitely an old skillet. $53 isn't too bad of a price. I think somebody outbid me at the last minute on it. I bid like 50 for it. And, I'd have paid $50 just because it's neat. It's kind of, some of the cool stuff you see. No idea who made it, but it's just fun to have stuff like that. Let's see. This here was a fully marked Victor. By fully marked, it's got all the, Victor cast iron skillet, Griswold Manufacturing Company. That's a number 9. That sold for, I think it was $150 and change. There you go. You can see all the markings on it. And I had recently got a number 8 full marked Victor for, I think it was 65 or 70. So I feel pretty good about that now. This is a little bit bigger, but 152. That's a little high, but not really bad. Most of them I've seen around $100. But anything bigger, number 8s nowadays, prices get kind of wonky. Let me see here. Mark Victor. Okay, this is a number 8 Wagner, but that's an arc straight logo. And they use that from about 1900 up until 1918 or so. So the early 1900s. For $71, that's a pretty good price for that. It's not out of line for what they go for. I mean, usually 75 to 100. So 71 for that is pretty good deal. Prepping for cedar plank trout and pig belly to make. All right. Well, take care, Alvin, and have fun with your trout and your pig belly. Let's skip ahead. Where is... I should be coming up on one pretty soon that was pretty interesting. This one here sold for $22. It's an unmarked skillet, or at least there's nothing obvious on it that you can see. I couldn't see any brand names on it, but this is an old skillet. You can tell by the see if we got a decent picture at the bottom of the handle. I think this is a unmarked Wagner from the late 1920s into the mid 30s. Wagner made a bunch of unmarked heat ringed stuff like this. Usually there's just a mold letter on them somewhere. A lot of times it's an X, but they made chicken fryers in this style that were unmarked, and they were kind of a budget brand, but I'm pretty sure this is a Wagner, and that went for $22, and that's a real good price for that. So I would have been happy to have that for $22. Whoops. Oh, here I got Yep. Billy Lee got him. The bots are out in force tonight. Okay, where were I? Marker. This was a Chicago hardware foundry. I think this was a Diamond 8 logo on this. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. Whoops. Yeah, it's a Diamond 8 logo. That's a Chicago hardware foundry. It's a smooth finish, not the hammered. And $42 is a pretty good price on that one. If I was smart and better at this sort of thing, I could probably download these into a separate file. And this was a real good price on this one. This is a either nickel or chrome plated, hammered Chicago chicken fryer. It's a number 9 actually, but it's dirty on the outside, but it looks like the plating is pretty decent all the way around yet underneath that. It's pretty good on the inside, so probably pretty good on the outside. You can see the high points. It's got the chrome showing through. But I bet if you clean that up, that'd been in real nice shape. And that went for only $32. I mean, that's a hell of a good deal on that. Let's see. Scroll down. Let's see here. This was a good sized one. Let me see. It looks like it was plated at one time, but most of the plating is gone. The handle, you can still see it. And that's a number 10 ARC logo Wagner. This was made somewhere between 1892 and up into the early 1900s, 1905 or so. There's a bit of overlap in their logos. You can see, well, it might not be too bad on the plating. It looks like it's kind of gone here. This looks more like just buildup, but definitely be worth cleaning up. And yeah, that's the ARC logo Wagner. And they use that right from the beginning, from 1891, 92 on into the early 1900s. Number 10, so that's a good sized pan too. And that sold for $125. That's about what you expect to pay for something like that. Maybe even a little bit more. If it would have been cleaned up and nice and shiny, you can see just exactly what shape the plating was in. It could definitely go for a little bit more than that. Plated ware tends to actually go for a little bit less than unplated cast iron, because unless the plating is absolutely brand new, pristine, it kind of brings the price down on it a little bit, actually. Let's see. Over here. Oh, this is a for $67, this here ain't too bad of a deal. This is after Chicago Hardware bought out Favorite Ware, and they started making stuff. They still used kind of the Favorite Smiley logo, but instead of Favorite Pequaware, they added Chicago Hardware Foundry Company and Favorite Cookware instead of Pequaware. And that's actually a fairly sought after style of logo. People want to have one of them. Looks like it's got some pitting on the back, but I think that would probably clean up pretty good. It's not really bad pitting. So this was made in the mid 1930s. So, you know, $67 for that. That's a pretty good price. I usually see them going for closer to 100 when you find one. So, you know, that was a decent deal on that one. Where is that oddball Wagner one? Let's see. Foundry, your favorite. I'm going to skip ahead just to show you this one here as soon as I find him. This one here. Wagner 14-inch cast iron pan, number 19. Sold for $266. But Wagner didn't make a number 19, you know, so I was naturally kind of intrigued by that. So, you know, checked her out, had a look at it, and we'll get to the back here. That's an arc straight logo. Like I said, that's early 1900s up until, you know, 1915, 16, 17 in there. You know, so that's a pretty old pan. But I thought they had a better picture of the number on it. But if you looked at it, come on, I know they had a good picture of the number. I'll zoom in on it. Look at it, that sure does look like a number 19. But it's really not. That is a number 12. You can't really see it, but there's just a bare little trace of the base of a 2 there. You know, it's got a big curly Q there, so that, you know, first glance, that definitely looks like a 19. But like I said, Wagner didn't make any number 19s. Although I think they made a number 20 in the stylized logo, smooth bottomed ones, I think. But most of them, they only made up to number 12. And there's, or at least most of these really early ones, they only made up to number 12. And some of the bigger ones came a little bit later on. I know they made like 14s, but yeah, they never did make any of them were number 19s. You know, those are just unheard of. But yeah, it looks like a 19, but that's actually a 2. And, you know, a 12-inch would definitely, or a number 12 would be 14 inches. And $256, that's about what you would expect to pay for something like this. You know, because that's a very old skillet. That's over 100 years old already. I was actually getting fairly close to the end of these finally. Working my way through it. Oh, I got that one on there. Let's see. Logo. This. Okay, we got a better picture. This is looks a little more like nickel plating, but this is an Erie number 7, and not exactly sure what the date on this one was. The Erie skillets, you can identify them by how much of you know, by the style of the handles, how distinct that rib is on the back. Sometimes they're filled in on the sides. They have a kind of a triangular reinforcement on the sidewall where the handle meets. On some of the series, it's really distinct. On some, it's kind of hard to see on this one. But on some of them, it's more blended in. Some of them have a real pronounced ridge around the top. And they all fall into, you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th series, you know, starting in 1880. This one, I would guess, late 1890s. early 1900s, and what that sell for? $101. It's not too bad of a price. That's what you expect to pay for something like that. If it wasn't plated, it would probably go for a bit more than that, actually. But number sevens, they're not really common. They're not really uncommon either. But they're not terribly hard to find, but they're, not as common as fives or eights. Sixes and sevens are a little less common. Number fours are really tough to find. Number twos are pretty much unheard of. Number two, anything is going to cost you a fortune. Yeah, we had that Griswold's Erie Scotch bowl earlier. This is a slant logo Scotch bowl. Flip around here. Got a little closer. Yeah, that's a slant logo Eerie logo. A little bit newer than the Griswold's Eerie, but not by much. This was the one that came right after that in their series. This would be, like I said, 1912, probably up to 1915 when they still had the Eerie. After that, they started with Erie, Pennsylvania, USA, instead of just Erie in the quotation marks. So this is around, 1910, 1915 in there somewhere. And that went for, was it $75? That's a little bit low for that. Usually the slant logo stuff goes for more. Like I mentioned before, $75 is kind of the generic price for almost any Scotch bowl. What was the Scotch bowl used for? They were used a lot for like cooking down syrup, cooking down, sorghum, things like that. They were nice for a soup bowl. There's a kind of a similar design they called a Maslin kettle, where it's it kind of gets bigger as you go up. It would help to keep things from scorching when you were cooking things down. A lot of these were used for soup kettles and things like that. It's got the ring on the side where you would use it for in a fireplace. With a crane, you'd hang it from the bale on the crane over the fire and pull it in and out with that ring on there. But they're kind of things. Nowadays, you can use them like a wok. They're kind of nice for things like that. But you make soup in them real nice. They're good for simmering and slow cooking things. Just about through these guys. I showed you that Erie 7. This is an old Wagner, $100. It's not too bad of a price. About what they go for. They called this a turtleback lid, just because of the style of the lid. And these are mostly early 20s, not in the greatest shape. I don't know about that knob. I'm not sure if that's really an original knob to it or not. But that's kind of the Wagner arc straight logo, Wagner Sydney. So this was, 19 teens up into the, 19 teens rather. And they don't get a good picture of the lid. But a lot of times the lid, said Wagner, round roaster or drip drop round roaster. I don't really think that knob is original. It could be, but it's tough to say. But $100 for that, the shape it's in is a fair price. They usually go for 135, 150 when they're nice and clean. So, that's about what you should pay for something that you got to work on. Find this guy again. We are just about wrapped up here. Okay. low. Let me see here. Okay, this shows about the best. This is called a straight logo, and it's Sydney Wagner, but there's no arc to it. It's just two straight lines of text, or Wagner Sydney rather, and the O below it. But this is in the low position, almost centered. The position of where they put their logos, especially with the arc straight and the straight, kind of varied. Sometimes they'd be up high by the rim. Sometimes they'd be kind of in the middle. Sometimes they'd be centered. So this one went pretty cheap. So, or fairly cheap, I think, 93. I guess that one didn't go all that cheap. That's about what you would go for. That's a number 10, so that's a good size skillet. So, for number 10, $100 for that's pretty reasonable. Like I said, most of the really, really old antique stuff, you're getting up into the higher prices. Now, there's a couple of these here that went pretty reasonable, $25 and $31 a piece. They're both pretty much the same. They're a stylized logo, but they have the outside heat ring, and they have the size number on the back. That means they were made before 1924, and between about 1915 or 16 up to 1924, because 1924 is when they put the catalog number on the back and moved the size number around to the handle. So for the two of them, one for 25, and there's another one the same thing for 31. That's real cheap for those. So somebody got a nice deal on both of them, because even a generic price for a number 8 skillet nowadays, cast iron, usually you're looking around $40, and something that old, normally I see those selling for a lot closer to 75. Just about done. Yeah, see, here's a number. Here's the same thing again for $52. I knew I had another one like that in there. And that's closer to what they normally sell for. So it's kind of weird sometimes how prices will go. What was this? This one's got some pitting on the back, $46, but that's an old ARC logo Wagner, from 1892 on up into the early 1900s, and $46 for number 10 is a fairly decent price. It's got quite a bit of pitting on it though, so it wouldn't really go for much more than that. I think we're just about through these. I'm going to double check here quick on my Yahoo mail, make sure Barbara got through. Should have did that a lot earlier, but she said she was. All right. There she is. So yes, Barbara has definitely won. Finally, somebody has won the Griswold Dutch oven and actually claimed it. I'm going to take one more look here. Whoops, don't want to go that way. Take one more quick look here if there's anything else I wanted to show you. And I will get this wrapped up. 10. No, I think that was about it. Take a quick look at this one here just to see. Yeah, that's a stylized logo with the heat ring on it, and it has the catalog number on the back. So that was made between 1924 and about 1935 or so, the mid 30s. And, you know, 43 bucks. That's a decent price on that. 10-inch, that's a number 8. So, pretty good price. You know, sometimes you can find some deals on some older stuff, you know, really vintage antique stuff. You know, some of the things there were fairly cheap. Some were pretty high, but that's just kind of what they're going for. The fruit lard press is very popular. It says you need to break your wallet open a little wider. Yeah, like I said, I see them in antique shops. I gotta get my cursor back on this screen here. Stop. Whoops. Didn't need to hit that. Stop sharing my screen. There I am. And you know, I see them in antique shops, you know, for 75 to 150, kind of depending on exactly what they are and what size. You know, on the auction sites, you know, they kind of go in there. But you know, there's different styles. You know, I mean, you're going to pay more. Griswold made them. You know, pretty much everybody made them, and a lot of different companies besides Wagner and Griswold did. You know, but you pay a good bit more for a, you know, brand like Griswold than you will for you know, Joe's Hardware and Machine Company sort of thing. But you keep your eye out. You should be able to find one, you know, pretty reasonable and in fairly decent shape. You know, usually the ones you see in antique shops are cleaned up fairly good. You know, 75 to 150. You know, eventually you just keep trying. Eventually you'll get a good deal on one. You know, I see that one you were looking at went for, what, like 56, 58. You know, and for that size of one, that was a pretty good price. But if you get something cheaper, you know, definitely go ahead. Or if you just don't have the cash on hand at the moment. So anyhow, yeah, I'm going to wrap this up. I'll be back next week, and I'll have something new and exciting for you then, hopefully. And that should just about wrap it up. I forgot to get the link for it, but if you get a chance, go watch my blueberry jelly making video. I used that vintage Wagner press that I have to press the juice for the jelly. And it really works good. I mean, if you're going to make jellies, something like that is really handy because you get a lot more juice pressed out of your fruit. It's got more body to it. I think it gets a lot more of the natural pectin out of the fruit. If you want to make it real super clear, you can, you know, strain it again just through cloth. But once you get that, you know, get as much juice extracted as you can from your fruit, you get a lot better yields out of it. And works a lot better than sitting there, you know, trying to squeeze a jelly bag and get all your juice out of it. So anyway, I'll see you all guys next time. Congratulations, Barbara, on winning the Dutch oven and actually sending me someplace to ship it to. So I'll get that sent out as soon as I can, and you should see that within a week or so. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.